Anne Goodwin scanned the boardroom from her seat at the head of the glossy mahogany table, her fingers drumming a silent beat on the binder in front of her. It was filled with months of market research, creative concepts, and campaign strategies, the lifeblood of Goodwin Marketing Solutions' upcoming quarter. Across from her, the firm's largest client, Mr. Leonard Bryant, shifted in his chair with a furrowed brow, his hands folded over the proposal she had just finished presenting. "I have to say, Anne," Mr. Bryant began, his voice betraying his disappointment, "I expected more. This isn't the groundbreaking work you promised." The words hung heavy in the air, clouding the room with a palpable tension. Anne mustered a practiced smile, concealing the sting of rejection. "I understand it's a lot to take in. Let's revisit the key points. I'm sure you'll see the potential," she replied, her tone even, betraying none of the pressure tightening in her chest. But the client was unmoved, and as the meeting adjourned with non-committal handshakes, Anne's confidence wavered. Mr. Bryant's parting, skeptical glance felt like a weight anchoring her to the depths of uncertainty. The day's misfortunes followed Anne down to Café Verve, a small haven beneath the towering edifice of her workplace. Michael, the barista with a knack for remembering the regulars' orders, greeted her with a warm, "Your usual, Anne?" "Yes, thanks," Anne replied, her mind still replaying the morning's debacle. When the time came to pay, her credit card was declined with a beep that seemed to echo through the cafe. A flush crept up her neck as she rummaged through her purse for cash. "Sorry, some glitch with the bank," she said, brushing off Michael's concerned look. The day's strain spilled over into the evening. Anne had planned a celebration at L'Etoile, but the romantic ambiance was spoiled by the tension that brewed between her and Alex Parker, her partner of 3 years. "Anne, you're here, but you're not present," Alex said, his voice a mix of frustration and concern. "You care more about these campaigns than—" "Than what? Than us?" Anne cut in, her voice rising. The surrounding din of conversation seemed to quiet, and she took a calming breath. "I'm sorry, it's just been a rough day." Alex reached across the table, his touch gentle. "Maybe it's time to reevaluate what's important." Anne nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere, on the unanswered questions that gnawed at her. The declined card, the cold reception in the boardroom, were these omens of a greater unraveling? That night, Anne lay awake, the digital glow of her phone illuminating messages of reassurance from Alex. Yet comfort eluded her, and sleep remained just out of reach. The peculiar incidents of the day lingered in her mind, a prelude to a melody of chaos she hadn't yet learned to play. The piercing ring of Anne's phone sliced through the stillness of the conference room, the caller ID flashing the name of her bank manager, Harold Jenkins. With a polite but strained smile, she excused herself, stepping into the hallway. Her heart thudded with a mix of anticipation and dread. "Ms. Goodwin," came Harold's formal tone, "I regret to inform you that we've detected irregular activity on your accounts, large withdrawals that don't fit your usual pattern." Anne leaned against the cool wall, her mind reeling. "There must be some mistake," she managed to say, the words echoing hollowly in her ears. "I'm afraid not," Harold replied. "We've temporarily frozen your accounts for security. I suggest you come in to discuss this personally." Returning to the boardroom felt like walking against a tide. The stares of her colleagues bore into her as she tried to resume the meeting, her focus shredded by the gravity of Harold's words. That night, Anne sat amidst a fortress of financial statements sprawled across her dining table. She trawled through each transaction, each date and amount, searching for an error, a clue, anything that might dispel the nightmare unfolding before her. But with every confirmed purchase and every legitimate withdrawal, reality tightened its grip. Her life's meticulous order was being unraveled by an unseen hand. Sleep was a stranger as she wrestled with denial. The comfort of her ordered existence, the belief in her impenetrable life, now seemed like a naive fantasy. She was a woman who had built her reputation on control, on the ability to anticipate and direct the flow of events. Yet here she was, powerless, a spectator to the theft of her own identity. The next blow came sharply with the morning sun. A courier delivered a thick envelope, her latest credit report, requested in a moment of panic the day before. With trembling hands, Anne tore it open. And as she scanned the pages, her heart sank. Lines of credit she'd never opened, debts she'd never incurred. The evidence was undeniable. Someone had stolen not just her money, but her name, her very identity. It was then that the doorbell rang. Alex, right on time for their weekend getaway, his face bright with the promise of escape. But the Anne that greeted him was a ghost of the woman he'd planned to whisk away. "I can't go, Alex," she said, the credit report in her hands shaking. "Someone's stolen my identity. My accounts, my credit, everything's compromised." Alex's face fell, his eyes searching hers for the woman he knew, the one who faced challenges with unshakable resolve. But all he found was vulnerability, a stark fear that made her seem smaller, less certain. "I need to fix this," Anne whispered, the words barely a breath. But they were enough to seal her decision, marking the point of no return on a journey she never chose to embark upon. Anne's determination led her to the cluttered yet somehow orderly office of Sam Thompson, a cybersecurity expert known for his prowess in digital forensics. Sam's walls were adorned with screens that cast a pale blue light across his concentrated face as he reviewed Anne's case. Identity theft, especially this sophisticated, is more personal than random, Sam remarked, his eyes not leaving the monitor. As Anne recounted her story, Sam typed away, pulling up pages of encrypted data, his office a capsule adrift in a sea of code. "We'll track the digital breadcrumbs," he assured her. "They always leave a trail." Anne, despite the chaos that had become her life, felt a flicker of hope. Under Sam's guidance, Anne found herself diving into the underworld of the internet, a place she'd only heard about in cautionary tales. She watched, fascinated and horrified, as Sam navigated through pages that seemed to materialize out of thin air, each click revealing more about her invisible adversary. It was a game of cat and mouse, except the mouse was a shadow and the cat was blind. It was past midnight when Anne's phone buzzed with an email alert from one of the credit bureaus. With Sam peering over her shoulder, she opened the message to find confirmation that her credit freeze was in place. It was a minor victory, but after the relentless stress of the past few days, it felt monumental. "That's one door closed to our friend," Sam said with a satisfied nod. Anne allowed herself a moment of relief. Her first since the ordeal began. Their small victory was a turning point. As they sat in the low light of Sam's office, surrounded by the hum of computers, Anne realized she wasn't alone in this fight. She had an ally, someone who not only understood the battlefield, but also believed in her cause. And with that realization came a newfound strength. Sam, usually a solo player in his digital crusades, found himself respecting Anne's resilience and her quick grasp of complex cybersecurity concepts. They were no longer just client and consultant. They were a team, and the battle lines were drawn. Anne Goodwin, her posture rigid with tension, sat in the impersonal ambiance of First Trust Bank's main office, facing the institution's fraud manager, Linda Pearson. The office, with its sleek lines and muted colors, did nothing to ease the turmoil brewing within her. Linda, with a clipboard full of forms and policies, began the arduous process of detailing the bank's protocol in cases of identity theft. "You'll need to provide all the evidence you've collected, file a detailed police report, and then we can start the claim process," Linda intoned, handing Anne a pen that seemed as cold and sterile as the room. Anne, her hands steady despite the tempest inside, filled out each form with a meticulousness born from her former life in marketing. The next appointment found Anne seated in a cramped interview room at the downtown police station, face to face with Detective Marcus Wells. The room was stark, save for a clock that ticked away moments of her life she'd never get back. Marcus, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, took notes as Anne recounted her story. "We see a lot of this," he said, his words attempting to be reassuring but instead sounding resigned. "We'll start an investigation, but these things take time." Anne's day of reckoning came amidst the laughter and conviviality of a family reunion at her Aunt Maggie's house, a setting that once promised comfort and now staged her confrontation with Joe, her cousin. As she navigated through the clusters of relatives, Anne's heart pounded with the dread of what was to come. With the family's cheerful din as a backdrop, Anne confronted Joe, her voice low but firm. "How could you do this to your own family?" she demanded, the papers containing Sam's evidence clutched in her hand. Joe, cornered and pale-faced, stammered denials, but the guilt in his eyes betrayed him. The room seemed to contract, the air thickened with tension, as a few nearby relatives paused to sense the undercurrent of discord. Joe's denial was weak, unconvincing. "Anne, you've got it all wrong," he said, but the words were empty, and they both knew it. Anne, powered by a mix of anger and heartache, cut through the lies. "I trusted you," she said, the finality in her voice drawing a clear line between them. Leaving the reunion in a blur, Anne felt the eyes of her family on her, their whispers a low hum behind her. The revelation that the thief was one of their own sent ripples of shock through the room. Anne stepped out into the cool evening, the fading sunlight doing little to warm the chill that had settled in her bones. In the aftermath of the family reunion, Anne found herself in the quiet of her apartment, the once comforting space now feeling too large and empty. The walls, adorned with framed accolades and photographs of her travels, seemed to mock her current predicament. She thumbed through an old photo album, the images of her smiling and holding up various awards, a stark contrast to her current despair. It was in this introspection that Anne recognized the irony of her situation. Her past pursuit of material success might have inadvertently sparked Joe's envy and greed. The next day, Anne's kitchen buzzed with the energy of a makeshift war room. Sam Thompson was there, his laptop open and surrounded by papers, along with Rachel, a member of Anne's newly formed support group for identity theft victims. They pored over bank statements, legal documents, and digital records, their heads together, plotting their next move. "We'll need solid proof to get ahead of this legally," Rachel advised, her own experience lending weight to her words. Sam nodded in agreement, his fingers flying over the keyboard as they compiled the evidence. The evening brought a new role for Anne. At the community center, she stood at a podium, her voice steady as she shared her story with a small audience of identity theft victims. There was a vulnerability in standing there, in the spotlight, but also a strength that came from the nods of understanding from the crowd. "If my experience can help even one of you," Anne said, "then everything I've been through will have been worth it." The act of speaking out, of transforming her pain into purpose, filled Anne with a sense of mission. Her blog had started as a personal diary of her ordeal, but it had evolved into a beacon for others navigating the same stormy waters. As she concluded her speech, the applause that followed was not just for her courage but also for the hope she instilled in others. Anne's newfound advocacy wasn't just a path to personal healing, it was becoming her life's unexpected calling. The blog posts, the community talks, the support group, each step Anne took not only pieced back her identity, but also built a new one, defined by resilience and a desire to make a difference. The courtroom was hushed as Anne took the stand, her hands clasping the evidence that Sam had helped her compile. The wooden bench was hard beneath her, a reminder of the gravity of the moment. Joe sat across the room, his face a mask of feigned innocence. As Anne recounted the betrayal, detailing how her cousin had exploited her personal information for his gain, she could feel the eyes of the jury on her, weighing her every word. The cross-examination was brutal. Joe's lawyer was adept at twisting facts, casting shadows of doubt on Anne's character. "Isn't it true that you've been known to be careless with your financial information?" he prodded, trying to shift the blame onto her. Anne's resolve wavered under the barrage of insinuations, but she held firm, her voice a beacon of truth amidst the storm of accusations. Back at Goodwin Marketing Solutions, the fallout from the courtroom drama reached Anne's professional life. Her once impeccable reputation was now tainted by whispers and sideways glances. She sat at her desk, once a symbol of her success, now a stage for her public shaming. The news of the lawsuit had spread, and colleagues who once greeted her with respect now offered only pity or suspicion. Her marketing campaign, once poised to set the industry ablaze, was now indefinitely shelved, collateral damage in the war she was waging to reclaim her name. The lowest point came one night when Anne, seeking solace in the silence of her home, received an email from an anonymous sender. It was detailed and explicit, laying bare the extent of Joe's deceit. The message outlined years of careful planning on Joe's part, a scheme so deep and so personal that it left Anne reeling. The betrayal wasn't just a moment of opportunistic theft. It was a calculated assault that had begun long before she had ever noticed the signs. The revelation was a gut punch that left Anne gasping for air, alone in the dark, save for the accusing glow of her laptop screen. Joe had not just stolen her identity, he had stolen years of her peace, her security, and her trust. It was a moment of profound violation, one that stripped away any remnants of familial affection and left in its wake a cold determination. Anne's journey had started with a need to restore her financial stability, but as she sat there in the dark, it transformed into something more. It became a quest not just for retribution, but for justice, not only for herself, but for the integrity of her entire existence. The fight against Joe was no longer just about money or credit scores. It was about reclaiming her life from the ruins he had made. After the verdict was read, Anne Goodwin's once unshakable composure gave way as the courtroom emptied, leaving her alone with the resounding words of the judge, words that felt like a final nail in the coffin of her previous life. She had lost her case against Joe, and with it, her financial security and her faith in the justice system. The man who had stolen her identity, her cousin, would face no real consequence for the havoc he wreaked on her life. Retreating to the sanctuary of her home, Anne was enveloped by its silence, a stark contrast to the flurry of legal battles and the cacophony of the courtroom. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, her achievements that once filled the space with pride now seemed like relics of a life she could no longer claim as her own. For days, Anne remained in a state of inertia, the curtains drawn, the world outside forgotten. She subsisted on the bare minimum, neither eating nor sleeping enough, ignoring the incessant chime of her phone, friends, colleagues, and even Alex reaching out. Her blog, once a source of catharsis and connection, sat untouched, the cursor blinking endlessly, waiting for words that wouldn't come. It was during these bleak hours that Sam Thompson stepped through her door, finding Anne on the back porch where she sat staring into the void, the garden overgrown and wild, reflecting the turmoil inside her. "You haven't been answering your phone," Sam said, his voice tinged with worry. Anne's gaze didn't waver from the horizon. "What's the point, Sam? I fought. I lost. There's nothing left." Sam took a seat beside her, the wood creaking under his weight. "You're wrong," he insisted. "There's everything left to fight for. You've taken hits before, rose above them. This is no different." She looked at him then, her eyes dull with grief. "How can you not see it? My credibility's shot. My finances are in ruins. I'm back to square one." "But you're not the same person you were at square one," Sam countered. "You've grown, learned, and you've got a voice. There's an army of people out there who need someone like you to lead the charge." Anne's self-pity warred with the truth in his words. Despite the bitter taste of defeat, she couldn't deny the spark of something that flickered within her at the idea of fighting back in a different way. Slowly, Anne began to re-engage with the world. She updated her blog, not with the tales of her triumphs, but with the raw, unvarnished truth of her defeat. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Her inbox was flooded with messages from others who had faced the same betrayal, the same battle against an unseen enemy. Emboldened by their stories and her own indomitable spirit, Anne found a new purpose. She partnered with a local nonprofit, using her experience to advocate for stronger laws against identity theft. She met with legislators, her personal narrative now serving as a potent example of the need for change. Each step she took on this new path was a step away from her past life. The community that rallied around her, the support group she had once attended as a victim, now welcomed her as a leader. The isolation she had felt was replaced by a sense of belonging, of shared purpose. Anne's defeat in the courtroom had been profound, but it had not been the end. It was, in truth, a beginning. Her loss became a source of strength, a painful yet powerful foundation upon which she began to rebuild. The wealth she had lost was replaced with something more valuable, a sense of worth that came not from her bank balance, but from the lives she touched and the difference she made. In this new chapter of her life, Anne discovered that her true identity was not tied to a number or a name, but to her actions and their impact on the world around her. She had been stripped of everything she thought defined her, only to find herself redefined, not by what she had, but by what she gave to others. Anne Goodwin's gaze was fixed on the bankruptcy forms that lay before her on the polished mahogany desk of her attorney, Rebecca Cho. The once unthinkable act of declaring bankruptcy had become her reality. With each signature, Anne felt as if she was closing a chapter of her life that had been written with relentless ambition and boundless optimism. Ms. Cho, a woman whose compassionate eyes offered understanding, watched Anne with a mixture of admiration and pity. "You're taking the first step towards a new beginning," she said gently, handing Anne a pen that seemed far heavier than its slight frame. Later that week, Anne found herself in the unfamiliar setting of a television studio, the glaring lights and bustling crew, a stark contrast to the solitude she had become accustomed to. She was about to share her story on a national talk show, a platform far removed from the boardrooms and marketing pitches of her past. As she waited in the green room, a flurry of nerves and anticipation churned within her. This was her chance to shift the narrative, to bring awareness to the silent epidemic of identity theft. On air, Anne spoke with a candidness that resonated with the audience. Her tale was no longer just her own, but a shared narrative of vulnerability and resilience. The host listened, deeply engaged, as Anne detailed not only her personal losses, but also the insidious nature of identity theft and the need for systemic change. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, Anne had not only educated a nation, but had also reclaimed a piece of herself. Returning to her downsized life, Anne discovered comfort in simplicity. She moved into a modest apartment, its small balcony overlooking a community garden. The neighbors, a tapestry of cultures and backgrounds, welcomed her with open arms and homemade dishes. Anne, who had once found solace in solitude, now found joy in the communal spirit that thrived here. One evening, as Anne shared stories and laughter with her new friends, she realized that the things she had lost, money, status, security, were not the cornerstones of happiness she had once believed them to be. The connection she was forming, the lives she was touching, and the community she was building offered a fulfillment that her former wealth could never provide. It was in these moments of shared humanity that Anne found her ultimate victory. The legal battles and financial ruin had stripped away the superficial layers of her life, revealing a core strength she had never acknowledged. Her transformation was not just personal, but emblematic of a greater journey that many face, but few have the courage to embrace. Anne's newfound sense of purpose and belonging was the true wealth she had gained from her losses. The adversity had reshaped her, not into the image of defeat, but into a figure of empowerment and hope for others. As she looked around at the faces in the garden, their smiles reflecting the soft glow of the setting sun, Anne realized that this redefined life was her greatest triumph.